Boris Johnson will reject any grovelling approaches by Brussels to extend the Brexit transition period, Downing Street has today warned. The Prime Minister's spokesman reaffirmed the government's hardline position after the International Monetary Fund to remain under the European Union's rulebook beyond the end of the year in the wake of the coronavirus crisis. The government was elected on a manifesto which made clear the transition period would end on 31 December 2020. That is now enshrined in primary legislation and it remains our policy, they said. We will not ask to extend the transition period, and if the EU asks we will say no. Extending the transition would simply prolong the negotiations, prolong business uncertainty, and delay the moment of control of our borders. Extending the transition would mean we will have to make it would also keep us bound by EU legislation, at a point when we need legislative and economic flexibility to manage the UK response to the coronavirus pandemic. IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva called for an extension to the post-Brexit transition period amid fears a hard exit from the EU's single market will create more uncertainty after the global pandemic passes. The former EU Commissioner told the BBC, "It is tough as it is. Let's not make it any tougher. My advice would be to seek ways in which this elective uncertainty is reduced in the interests of everybody, of the UK, of the EU, the whole world." David Frost, the Prime Minister's chief negotiator, yesterday warned Michel Barnier the UK had no intentions to extend the pair, however, agreed to resume trade talks after the coronavirus pandemic saw negotiations grind to a halt. Both sides will hold 3 negotiating rounds before a high-level meeting between Mr Johnson and EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The Prime Minister has warned he will use the discussion to decide whether to continue working on a deal with Brussels or move to concentrating on preparing to exit the single market on World Trade Organization rules. Express understands a number of European Union member states are drawing up plans to use British cash to help fund the bloc's economic recovery from the impact of the global pandemic. Sources say some diplomats and officials have factored in the government's financial contributions to Brussels' coffers for one EU source said, "We are currently looking at all the possible financing options." Some people also say, what can we do with a British contribution to the MFF? Will the Brits really go away in 2020 or not? Will that provide extra money? Mrs von der Leyen yesterday called on member states to raise an £871 billion war chest to help rebuild the EU's worst-hit countries and their economies. The Commission chief said, "Europe needs a new Marshall Plan. We will need massive public and private investments to rebuild the economy and create new jobs. The key to this is a new, powerful EU budget." The Marshall Plan financial support package was provided to Western Europe by the US in the 1940s to support the continent's recovery after the Second World War. European leaders are expected to start discussions on the plans next week during an emergency Europe